Welcome to the 2003 Carlube TVR Tuscan Challenge, and this is what we're going to be racing, a TVR Tuscan. It's got a 460 brake horsepower TVR V8 in the front. The whole car only weighs 860 kilos, so as Jeremy Clarkson said, you can achieve the same effect at home by taking the engine from a Type 42 destroyer and fitting it into your tumble dryer. It's going to be very, very close racing because the cars are all identical. Drivers are fairly similarly talented, so watch this space.
Round one of the Carlube TVR Tuscan Challenge is here at Donington. It's the national circuit in use. There are two races, and pole position for the first round of the championship goes the way of Richard Hay.
I'm delighted. The guys have done such a fantastic job on the car, Jonathan especially, and it's just kind of a bit of a reward for them as much as anything. So we can get it off the line in the race. It seems to have been a problem in the past.
No such problems for this man, David Mason, but he's yet to win in the Tuscan.
We didn't have any testing hardly, apart from the test this morning, 20 minutes. Mainly due to a lack of sponsors, and we managed to get get something in the bag so we can turn up for the weekend.
And returning to TVR Tuscan racing for the GT campaign, Richard Stanton.
You go GT racing, but if you want serious, quick, fun, exhilarating, there's nothing better than a Tuscan.
Ready then for the first 10 laps of the season. The car's on the grid. We're on board with Wayne Phelan in the in-work car. The lights go to green, away they go. Now has Richard Hay made a better start than normal? Somebody slow away. That's Philip Keane, who's made a lousy start from fourth on the grid. But Richard Hay has made a reasonable start. He's eager to lead as they go into Redgate. David Mason's on the outside of him. The field files through for the first time. Mason round the outside of Hay. Mason leads then as they go downhill for the first time. David Mason leads Richard Hay, and somebody in trouble there. Look, crawling around. That's Gareth Evans. Gareth Evans in trouble, David Mason in the lead. Richard Hay is second, third, the yellow and black car of Richard Stanton, and a change there as Darren Dowling goes ahead of Ben Samuelson. On board now with Tim Hood accelerating under Starkey's Bridge for the first time. It's Mason and Hay getting away a little bit from Richard Stanton in third place as they turn through McLean's. Mason leaving the door open. Richard Hay tries to find a way through on the inside, but he can't do it. Uphill for the first time into Coppice, double apex right-hander. Mason leads, Hay second. Third is Richard Stanton. Fourth, Lee Caroline after a misfire in qualifying, going better now. And Tim Hood there in the black car, moving ahead of Ben Samuelson. Samuelson drops back a place, gets sideways coming out of Coppice, and the race leaders come to the chicane for the first time. Lee Caroline challenging Richard Stanton. Caroline's blue and white car through, up into third place there. Somebody off, it's one of the Hawthorns cars. Jan Persson, I think it is. He's going to be able to get back onto the tarmac and carry on. Big moment for him though. So David Mason and Richard Hay getting away now from Lee Caroline, but Caroline could be the man to watch. He's battled his way up into third place. He's pulling away from Richard Stanton, and if the two ahead of him start scrapping amongst themselves, he should be able to latch onto the tail of the top two. Stanton is fourth, fifth is Darren Dowling, and then side by side for sixth, Tim Hood and Ben Samuelson are still at it. Race leaders turning their way through McLean's then. David Mason, Richard Hay, then Lee Caroline ahead of a fourth place, Richard Stanton. Stanton returning to TVRs after a year in GTs last season, clipping the curb. David Mason, the race leader. Last year he tended to play second fiddle to his CDL teammate Steve Guglielmi. Well, double champion Guglielmi has moved on and up and out for this year, and that means now that David Mason is left pretty much as the team leader. He's yet to win in a Tuscan though. Is this going to be his day? Richard Hay is behind him, then Lee Caroline third, taking Richard Stanton with him. Darren Dowling fifth. And further back, Wayne Phelan, Dowling's teammate, losing out there to Pete Osborne, coming into the chicane. Osborne goes round the outside of him, takes the place. On the grass there you can see Martin Crass's car that didn't take the start of the race. Tim Hood still battling there with the Ben Samuelson car ahead of him. Samuelson having retaken the place. Tim Hood hard at work. It's a very difficult ride down through the Craner curves. Ben Samuelson ahead of him. Samuelson in the car that Ian McKellar won the championship with a few years ago. It's been rebuilt, repainted for this year, and Ben Samuelson getting better and better as the driver all the time, fending off Tim Hood. Now the gap between the leaders is coming down a little bit. Richard Hay now closing back onto the tail of David Mason. Lee Caroline in third. He's being caught again by Richard Stanton there. Somebody in trouble and out of the race, and that is Rod Barrett. the TVR dealer, he runs the Hawthorns TVR dealership, is out of the race as David Mason locks up coming into the chicane, and Richard Hay now just about close enough, I reckon, to have a go at him as they come down towards Redgate. He's getting into the toe of David Mason's car. He's being sucked along in the slipstream down towards Redgate. Hay has a look on the inside. Is he going to go for it? Not this time, he's not. Nose to tail through the corner. Now accelerating onto the top of the Craner curves. In third place there, Lee Caroline. Fourth, Richard Stanton. And if the battle for the lead now starts to shape up as we expect it will, those two behind are going to get much closer. Mason is going to have to start defending. That means he'll go slower. He'll take the slower, more defensive line, certainly. And the silver helmeted Richard Hay right up behind him now. Race order, Mason from Hay, then Caroline in third place, Stanton fourth. Up towards McLean's, Hay goes through, the door left wide open by Mason, Richard Hay scrabbles by, everything was locked up, but Richard Hay takes over the lead, great bit of driving. The man from pole position is the race leader, Richard Hay leads, but David Mason is coming back at him as they come through Coppice, and look now how much closer Lee Caroline is. Under the Dunlop Bridge, down towards the chicane they come, new race leader Richard Hay, Mason tucked up behind him, trying to level with him as they come into the braking area. He can't do it this time. The former Caterham champion is going to hang on in there. Richard Hay leads. Former Superstocks champion David Mason tucked up behind him, and Lee Caroline, the man that won the pickup truck championship 2 years ago, is getting closer and closer and closer. David Mason tries to fight back going into Redgate, but Richard Hay sits in the middle of the road, meaning that Mason's got to go the long way round. Nose to tail the two leaders, the three leaders now. Look at the way that Lee Caroline has picked up the pace. He's right with David Mason coming down through the Craner curves. Mason's trying to attack and defend at the same time. Richard Hay is not getting away from Mason, and now the real danger man is Lee Caroline in number 38. You can see the blue and white car there tucked up behind David Mason in third as they make their way up now towards the right-hander of McLean's corner. Turn right, touch the curve. It's Hay just ahead of Mason, but Mason now defending from Lee Caroline. That could give Richard Hay the chance he needs to make a break. Not much of one though. Mason catching back up again, going now into Coppice. Out of the long right-hander, down towards the chicane. Mason attacking and defending. Lee Caroline doing all the attacking there. He tries to go to the outside of Mason. Mason goes to the outside of Hay. There's not enough room for Caroline. David Mason, can he get back into the lead? No, he locks up. He goes a little bit wide. Lee Caroline goes second. Mason on the grass. They come out almost three abreast. Caroline then on the curb. He touches Hay. Hay spins across the road. Bang into the wall. Whoa, just misses Martin Krause's parked car. Big, big moment. The left-hand side of Richard Hay's car absolutely shattered. Richard's okay. Clambers free of the wreckage. It all started then with David Mason locking up. Lee Caroline seized his chance. He went round the outside of Richard Hay through the chicane. There was contact. Not deliberate, but the net result is that Richard Hay fired off into the wall. So Mason takes back the lead. Lee Caroline is second and chipping away at the gap once more. Richard Stanton in third, going after Lee Caroline now. I just wonder whether Caroline's car suffered any damage in that as well. There was a brief clash between him and Hay, and you saw the outcome of it. Richard Hay's car turned across the front of Lee Caroline's, thumped the wall good and hard. Now look at Philip Keane, number 41 there. He's the other man to watch in this after that dreadful start that he made, and he makes contact there with Tim Hood. Hood goes onto the grass, going up towards Coppice. Hood goes off, gravel beckons. Good night, that's it. Tim Hood in the gravel. He tries to get out the other side. Lots and lots and lots of gravel being kicked up. He makes his way to the edge of the circuit. Has he got out? The car's digging in. That's it now. Tim Hood's race over. It was a valiant effort to get out of the gravel. It'll take ages for the dust to settle, but Tim Hood is going no further. Meantime, the race leader is David Mason. In second place is that man running wide, Lee Caroline. And in third is Richard Stanton. Here's a replay. On board with Tim Hood. Philip Keane goes up the inside, gains the place coming out of McLean's. Tim Hood sees his chance. He goes up the inside. Keane tries to move across and defend. There's contact. It puts Hood on the grass. He's got very little traction. He tries to brake. He slews off into the gravel bed. He keeps his foot in though. Tries to drive out the other side, but to no avail. Up now to the checkered flag. David Mason is going to win a very lively TVR Tuscan Challenge race, and it'll be the first one he's won. Here at Donington, round one of the Carlube TVR Tuscan Challenge, the sprint race won by David Mason. Second over the line, Lee Caroline. Third over the line, Richard Stanton. But a very dramatic race has ended with a shattered car for Richard Hay and a fight for fourth, Darren Dowling versus Philip Keane. Keane recovering after that dreadful start, but fourth place goes the way of Darren Dowling. Fifth over the line, Philip Keane, and coming home for sixth is Ben Samuelson. David Mason's winning margin just over a second. Richard Stanton's engine having dropped onto 6 cylinders costs him any chance of retaliating. There's your top 10.
I was on the outside of Richard Hay coming down the long straight into the chicane, and nearly got round, then I couldn't quite stop in time. So I shot across the grass on the exit of the chicane, came onto the track sideways, and the lead managed to get up the other side of Richard Hay, and then of course consequently they weren't all going to fit on the grass at the same time, so that made it rather exciting for a second or two.
It was a hard race, and then I got around the outside of Richard and David at the hairpin here, and he just seemed to run out on me, and it ended up with Richard on the grass and me on the grass. So I feel that he ran out on me. So
had the sprint race, and that decides the grid for the feature race. David Mason was the winner, his first victory in a Tuscan. He'll start on pole. And after working very hard indeed on his car, the mechanics of Richard Hay will watch him now start from the pit lane. The lights are on red, they go to green, bit of creeping from 1 and 2. We're on board with Darren Dowling then as they make the run down towards Redgate. A poor start again from Philip Keane, a poor start too from Lee Caroline, and poor old Philip Keane barely gets off the line. Mason leads Caroline, then Dowling, then Ben Samuelson, then Richard Stanton as they turn into Redgate. Bit of a nudge between Wade Phelan and Pete Osborne there. Accelerating now up towards Hollywood for the first time. Phelan goes ahead of Osborne there on the inside line, and that's Richard Hay. His second race has lasted but a corner. He pulls off. Presumably the suspension that was so badly damaged is still not right, and Richard Hay decides to cut his losses early on. He is out. Mason is leading then as they go towards Coppice. Lap 1, that's Pete Osborne. Climbing uphill now, going into the right-hander of Coppice Corner. Ahead of him is Tim Hood. The race leaders, though, are on their way down towards the chicane for the first time, and David Mason is the race leader. Lee Caroline is second. Underneath the Dunlop Bridge they come. In third place, Darren Dowling, this year running as teammate to Wayne Phelan for Insane Racing. And into the chicane, Lee Caroline has got Dowling right up behind him. Then fourth is Ben Samuelson, fifth is Richard Stanton, sixth is TVR chairman Peter Wheeler, seventh Hugh Marshall, eighth is Wayne Phelan, ninth is Tim Hood, and 10th Pete Osborne as they come across the line. Lee Caroline going after David Mason and taking Darren Dowling with him possibly. Dowling, somebody else that's yet to win in the Tuscan. He's always there or thereabouts, and the race leaders turn out of Redgate as Phelan goes ahead of Hood. These two battling. We're on board now with Tim Hood, the in-web car ahead of him as they set off at the top of the Craner curves. Underfunded, but a great competitor, Tim Hood. Very spectacular driver, very good in the wet last year at Croft. Looking for a way past a much improved Wayne Phelan, but Phelan leaves the door open and Tim Hood goes by. Hood goes ahead in the SCX-backed car as they turn out of the old hairpin. Heading now under Starkey's Bridge, climbing up through Schrunt's Curve, then on towards McLean's. Lee Caroline going for the lead. He's right up behind David Mason now. Looking on the inside, going into Coppice. Caroline goes by. Lee Caroline takes over the lead then. The two leaders are nose to tail. Darren Dowling riding shotgun, but is he going to be close enough to challenge come the end of the straight? He's trying to get into the toe of David Mason's car. Mason tries the inside. Caroline defends down to the chicane. They're going to be side by side. Mason on the outside, Caroline on the inside, and that's the line to have. Lee Caroline stays ahead there. David Mason in second place. Darren Dowling third as they blast now up over the line. They're heading down towards Redgate. Mason moves to the inside to get past Caroline. Dowling looking for a gap, but Lee Caroline stands on the brake, swings the car into the corner. He still leads. David Mason going a little bit wide now. Darren Dowling tries to make the run up alongside, but he can't do it. These three running as one as they come downhill. Down now towards the old hairpin. Swing right. In fourth place, look, is Ben Samuelson, and he's getting closer as well as the top three start to battle amongst themselves. Lee Caroline turning now up towards Schrunt's Curve. There is Darren Dowling, his target. Just ahead of him is David Mason. Approaching McLean's corner. Turn right. Lee Caroline using the curb. So is Mason. Darren Dowling a bit tidy there, but he runs slightly wide, drops a wheel over the curb. Ben Samuelson still going well in fourth place. Richard Stanton fifth, and not yet being able to match the pace of those ahead of him. Richard Stanton, somebody else that's yet to win in a TVR Tuscan, not for the want of trying, and the ultra-smart DeWalt Tools backed car is chasing after Ben Samuelson as they turn into the chicane this time around. It is Lee Caroline using all of the curbs to his advantage there. David Mason tucked up with him. On board with Tim Hood, who's that to the right? It's Philip Keane. Keane, remember, made another daft start. He's battled his way through on the inside, and Philip Keane then takes a place away as David Mason tries to take the lead back, and he does take the lead back from Lee Caroline. Great stuff. Mason goes through, going into Redgate. Mason goes wide. Caroline comes back at him. Mason all over the curb. Lee Caroline retaliates, retakes the lead. Great stuff. Caroline ahead of Mason, then Darren Dowling as they come downhill. David Mason stabs on the brakes there midway through the Craner curves. Lee Caroline has taken his lead back. Richard Stanton has taken fourth away. Look from Ben Samuelson. These two still nose to tail as well. Tremendous race. Battles going on right the way through the order. Climbing now towards McLean's. This is Lee Caroline, the race leader, with David Mason behind him. The two of them used to race against each other on the ovals. They're both former oval racing champions in mini stocks and super stocks. And more recently, Lee Caroline, the champion in pickup truck racing. He knows all about overtaking and how to battle your way through. Good scrap here as well. Hugh Marshall returning to Tuscan Racing ahead of Wayne Phelan. And there, number 27 is Jan Persson, the Swede that lives in London. Leaders at the chicane, Mason up the inside of Caroline. He's going to be on the outside as they come out of the chicane. It's almost a repeat of the Hay-Caroline situation, but Lee Caroline then has a tighter line out of the chicane. Mason has enough room to live with him right the way down towards Redgate, with Darren Dowling looking for a way pass as well. Side by side, the leaders touch going into Redgate. Mason through on the inside, Dowling through on the inside. Lee Caroline hung out to dry there, but Darren Dowling can't quite get the run out of the corner. Caroline goes back ahead of him. Darren Dowling's car just not looking quite as quick as those two ahead of him. He was given a chance there, but he couldn't quite take it. David Mason fending off Lee Caroline as they bounce over the curb at the old hairpin, running nose to tail now, climbing up towards Front's curve once again. Dowling third, dropping away a little bit. Richard Stanton fourth, Ben Samuelson fifth. Nose to tail, the race leaders swing out of McLean's, accelerating now up towards Coppice, and Caroline now has a look on the inside, going into the right hand, and there's a gap on the inside. Is he close enough? Yes, he is, on the curb. Flings the car up the inside of David Mason. They touch, they get sideways, and Mason just about keeps his nose in front here. On board with Dowling, getting dragged along by Mason. He gets past Lee Caroline. Now, can he do anything about the race leader coming into the chicane? Lee Caroline is tucked up behind Mason and alongside Dowling, and he's going to take the place back, is he? Yes, he is. Fantastic racing. Over the line, Mason, Caroline, Dowling. Down towards Redgate. Richard Stanton's getting closer to them as well, and he's taking Ben Samuelson with him. Samuelson's alongside as they come into Redgate. The purple car can't get past the yellow one. That means that Stanton fends off Samuelson, and Caroline's attacking for the lead once again. They're side by side going into Hollywood. Down the hill they come. Caroline goes back through. Wow, great move. Lee Caroline retakes the lead. There are more battles going on. Wayne Phelan here trying to attack Hugh Marshall and fend off Pete Osborne. Round Redgate they go to the top of the Craner curves this time. This is Wayne Phelan's view. He may not be as high up the order as his teammate Darren Dowling, but he's working no less hard. Down through the Craner curves. Ahead of him there is Hugh Marshall. The CDL car ahead of the InWeb car. Pete Osborne's turquoise one is next up. There it is. Osborne returning to Tuscans as well. He's racing the cars before, but he's back after a time away. And a curb-hopping Stanton now is attacking Darren Dowling. Now Dowling, all of a sudden, he's losing touch with the top two, and he's coming under pressure. Under the Dunlop Bridge, down they come now towards the chicane. Hard on the brakes, Dowling moving across to the middle of the road, defending from Stanton, who goes by. Look at that! Like a missile, Richard Stanton flings the car into the chicane. He goes straight across the front of Darren Dowling, who gets shoveled wide onto the curb. He's not very impressed about it. Richard Stanton doesn't care, he's third. It was a very late braking manoeuvre going into the chicane. And now look, Dowling is under pressure by Philip Keane. After that pop start, Keane recovering very well. He's got himself ahead of Samuelson. And this is Wayne Phelan coming out of the chicane with this time Pete Osborne ahead of him. As Wayne Phelan got a problem, he's dropping back a little bit. And you can see there the Hawthorns twins are attacking him. Jan Persson and Rod Barrett, the team boss, up on the inside, going into Redgate. Persson goes ahead. The Swede then, in the Colin Blower Motorsport prepared car, Jan Persson goes ahead of Wayne Phelan, and Phelan now trying to attack and defend at the same time. He wants the place back and he wants to keep Rod Barrett behind him. Down through the Craner curves they go. Great scrap these two are having. Nose to tail. Phelan having a look back up on the inside. Can't do it. He's driven much better this weekend than we've seen in the past. He went very well in the free practice session yesterday morning. The leaders come through the chicane. Philip Keane trying to go around the outside of Dowling. He can't do it. Philip Keane came into Tuscans last year at Thruxton. He'd only had a couple of races or so before this weekend. And he's proved that he's a very quick driver. If he can make better starts, he'll be a real force to be reckoned with. Lee Caroline and David Mason are still the top two. Stanton a distant third, fourth Dowling, fifth Keane, sixth Samuelson, and these three running absolutely together now. Jan Persson coming into the chicane. Still, he's got Wayne Phelan tucked up behind him. And behind Phelan is Rod Barrett. This is Wayne's view. Up through the gears, accelerating down towards Redgate. The Speed 8 engine hard at work. Wayne Phelan having a look on the outside of Jan Persson's car. He's not going to be able to get through there, I doubt it. It's a brave effort. He's going to try. He swings his way round on the outside line. He uses the curve, the grass, the gauze, everything to his effect. Persson goes through ahead. So does Rod Barrett. A for effort, but I'm afraid not much for execution there. Wayne Phelan ran wide at Redgate, loses a place and loses time as well. Philip Keane still attacking Darren Dowling as they go down towards the chicane once again. He's running out of opportunities though in order to get past. Here are the leaders, they're still side by side. Wonderful race this. Lee Caroline working oh so hard for his first win in a TVR Tuscan. They come across the line then now to start the last lap with David Mason right up behind him, and then Richard Stanton, who means business with the headlights on, in third place. Still fourth is this man, Darren Dowling. Ahead of him you can see Nigel Tuscan, soon to be lapped. And that's Philip Keane from nowhere, diving up on the inside. He nearly obliterates Tuscan. That was a sensational move. Somehow Keane keeps it on the black bit. He's lost the place again. Darren Dowling got ahead of him. Awesome move by Philip Keane. Pity it didn't work, but down through the crater curves he goes, still up behind Darren Dowling, who laps Roger Arbus goes. Ex-Martin short car, turning now through the old hairpin. Darren Dowling being very busy in his defence here. Philip Keane right up behind him. Here are the leaders with half a lap remaining. It is Lee Caroline just ahead of David Mason, and Richard Stanton is closing and closing rapidly. Out of coppice, down towards the chicane for the last time. Has Lee Caroline done enough to win a TVR Tuscan Challenge race for the first time in his career? He and David Mason only joined the Tuscan fraternity last year. Mason's had a win already today. Can Lee Caroline even the score? Yes, he can, because as they come to the chicane, he's ahead. They make the sprint up to the line, nose to tail, but Lee Caroline wins for the first time. Great race. Caroline wins. Second is David Mason. Third is Stanton. For fourth over the line is just going to be Darren Dowling, but we're looking at Wayne Phelan's view. Coming now down towards the chicane. Ahead of him you can see Jan Persson. There is Pete Osborne. Osborne's tucked up behind Hugh Marshall. They're battling for 9th place as they come across the line. Marshall taking 9th, Osborne 10th, Jan Persson just then hangs on to 11th, and Wayne Phelan 12th as they come across the line. But the order though looks like this. Lee Caroline the winner, from Mason, Stanton, Dowling, Keane and Samuelson rounding out the top 6. Tim Hood in 7th.
I got out in the lead and I thought, right, I'll try and pull away now, but he just wouldn't let me go, so it was a hard fight to the end. But we were side by side, 2 abreast down. You know, you can't get cleaner, better racing than that. It's, you know, it's good racing.
We've been racing against each other since we were teenagers, and it's been the same throughout every formula that we've been together in. It's been good, close racing, and like I just said to somebody else, Rubbin's racing, and that's how close it was. It was superb.
What happened was I probably left the race a little bit late and should have kept closer. But, you know, to be fair to them, they took some catching. So, and Ben Samuelson, I think it was behind me at one point. He was driving a very good race as well.
So, with points on offer in each race, this is how it looks after Donington. Lee Caroline leads by just a point from David Mason. Richard Stanton's third ahead of Darren Dowling and Philip Keane. Ben Samuelson is in 6th. Hello and welcome to round 2 of the Carlube TVR Tuscan Challenge. We're at Snetterton in Norfolk. Again, 2 races, the sprint and the feature race, coming up later on in the programme. Last time out though, the cars were at Donington. There was a win apiece for Lee Caroline and David Mason, and that means that Caroline heads the championship by just a point from Mason, with Richard Stanton 3rd, Darren Dowling 4th and then Philip Keane 5th. But here for race 1 in Norfolk, the man on pole is David Mason.
Well, if it carries on this way, then hopefully we've got a good season to look forward to. I'm really pleased with today, despite a minor setback in testing with a gearbox go after 6 laps. Fortunately, the team had a spare. We put that in and used the first part of qualifying as a small test, minor alteration, and then to go out and try and do a decent lap time, and it's proved to work out quite well.
The opposition will come from this man. Darren Dowling lines up 2nd.
The lap I could set the fastest time. Peter Wheeler got in the way at the chicane, but you can't have everything, so who knows, I could have been on pole.
And this man starts only 3rd on the grid. It's the championship leader, Lee Caroline.
The team and the boys were pushing me to go back out, but we was on pole for a long time, and then we've only done 5 laps, so hopefully we've saved some tyres for the race, so hopefully we'll be all right.
So 13 laps about to get underway then. Mason and Dowling, the front of the grid, the second row, Lee Caroline and Richard Stanton. The lights are on red, the engine notes rise, the lights go to green, away they go. Good start by Philip Keane. Lee Caroline there gets squeezed a little bit by Richard Stanton. Keane tucks in behind him, and a bad start by Richard Hay, who I think got squeezed off against the pit wall as well. They turned their way there for the first time round Riches with in the lead, but only just David Mason. Second is Darren Dowling, and for third, look, side by side, heading up towards Sear Corner. Lee Caroline having to go on the inside of the yellow car of Richard Stanton. Caroline clatters across the curb, can't quite find a way past the Salisbury builder as they make their way then now down towards the Ettis for the first time. Number 27 there, Jan Persson going through as the race leaders are side by side. The blue car is that of Darren Dowling, and he leads at the end of the Revit Straight. For third, side by side, Lee Caroline still looking for a way there to try to get past Richard Stanton. 5th is Philip Keane, 6th is Samuelson, 7th is Hood, 8th is Hay, and the top 2 now getting away from the rest of them as Lee Caroline has another go to try and take 3rd place, and he does so coming into Coram, and Philip Keane goes through as well there. Great move. Richard Stanton down to 5th. The 2 leaders then getting away as they come into Russell to complete lap 1. Lee Caroline using the curb there. Philip Keane up behind him, then the yellow and black DeWalt car of Richard Stanton, and the rest of them come pouring across the line. Keane the man to watch though now. Right on the tail of Lee Caroline as they head past the pits, having a look on the outside. There's not much room for him. Lee Caroline makes the car as wide as possible, so Caroline hangs on to 3rd, Keane 4th, and still looking for a way past now as they go up towards Sear Corner. A replay of the start from on board with Pete Osborne. Ahead of him, to the left, is Tim Hood. To the right, Ben Samuelson. And look at Richard Hay there, being squeezed by Lee Caroline up against the pit wall. He has to back off, sort himself out, find a bit of room. And that has cost Richard 2 or 3 places right away from the lights going to green. That's Pete Osborne hard at work, looking for a way past Jan Persson, diving up on the inside, locks up, scrabbles into Sear. Swings the car right, runs wide though, and Jan Persson comes back through on the inside. Pete Osborne gains a place and loses it in quick succession. Darren Dowling's car twitching its way now out of the bomb hole in towards Coram Curve. Right up behind him there, in number 2 is David Mason, and Dowling with a wheel over the curb on the inside of Coram, a very daunting, fast right-hander. He still leads though as they come down towards Russell. They're being caught, the top 2. Look, Philip Keane and Lee Caroline are getting much closer. Caroline now tries to get the run on Keane as they come out of Russell, up across the line. You can see the mechanics on the pit wall there, urging on the drivers as they come past the pits. It's still, though, Dowling ahead of Mason. Into Riches they turn. Back onto the power, up now towards Sear Corner. Keane 3rd, getting away ever so slightly here from Lee Caroline. The top 2, though, still nose to tail. And remember, they've got another race to come later on in the day. We're on board then now with David Mason. Ahead of him is Darren Dowling. You can see what a bumpy ride it can be in a Tuscan. He heads to the outside line then, underneath the vehicle bridge, going into the S's. Fastest part of the circuit, then stand on the brakes. Can he go around the outside? No, he can't. Darren Dowling with the quicker, tighter inside line, moves through, takes the lead, bumps the curve, and while they're battling like this, they're holding one another up. And that means now that Philip Keane is reeling them in. Dowling a bit sideways, as he was a lap ago there, as he twitches his way through the bomb hole into Coram Curve. David Mason right up behind Dowling. He can't yet find a gap though. And Darren Dowling driving very defensively, slows early. Mason shoves his nose up on the inside, still can't find a way by. And Philip Keane now makes it 3 for the lead as they come out of Russell, up across the line. And that's Pete Osborne making a real porridge of it. Round he goes, he's on the grass, looks for the black bit, sets off again now. The dust is settling, and Lee Caroline, the championship leader, is in trouble. Look, he heads for the pit lane. This is a replay of Pete Osborne coming into the S's too quickly. Almost runs out of road, scrabbles into the first part, round comes the back. Dust goes everywhere. Finds just about which direction he should be going in. Turns the car round, almost loses it again. Sets off though, across the dirt, across the curb, back onto the circuit. Darren Dowling coming under real pressure though now from David Mason. This for the lead, remember. Dowling, who's never won in a Tuscan. David Mason had his first win a fortnight ago, and he's going to take the lead as they come into Russell. Dowling forced across the curb, but David Mason goes through. Mason up front then. Darren Dowling urging the car on, has a problem. He slows coming over the line, and now look, Philip Keane looking for a way past him. Darren Dowling has got some sort of problem. Philip Keane now moves up into 2nd place. Turning their way through Riches up towards Sear. Now, can Darren Dowling get the car to the end of the race? Let's see. He's lost the lead, he's lost 2nd, he's losing time, and then the Richards are now 4th and 5th. It's Richard Stanton being caught by Richard Hay. Richard Hay lost time, remember, at the start. He had a big spin in qualifying as well when he tripped over Jan Persson's car. That didn't do his tyres any good. But here, Richard is fighting back well. He's tucked up behind the man that was one of his co-drivers at Le Mans last year, Richard Stanton, and the 2 of them nose to tail now. Richard Stanton's day started rather badly when he had a spin on the warming up lap. Now though, he's 4th and working very hard to fend off Richard Hay. Wheel lifting there as they go through the bomb hole on towards Coram, and Richard Hay means business now. Headlights on. Out of Coram, drop down towards Russell. There's David Mason using the curb, accelerating now in the lead of the race. In 2nd is Philip Keane, 3rd, and responding is Darren Dowling, 4th and 5th, Richard Stanton, and then Richard Hay. Up they come across the line. David Mason now, by the look of it, is getting away just a little bit. In 2nd place, Philip Keane, who despite his pace, and he's a very quick driver in these cars and in the past in single-seaters, he's not really bringing down the gap sufficiently to challenge the leader. Nor is Richard Stanton yet close enough to Darren Dowling. Is Richard Hay, though, close enough yet to have a go at Richard Stanton. Here they come. Round Sear, onto the Revit straight, back onto the power. And this is Philip Keane having a problem, fishing for gears. He finds one eventually, but that has cost him time. It cost him a place as Darren Dowling goes second, and I just wonder whether it may have taken the edge off the engine of Philip Keane's car. He's got Richard Stanton up alongside him, and through on the inside goes Stanton now. Richard Stanton takes third, and Richard Hay is also looking for a way past Philip Keane, and that'll be for fourth. Leaders then now on towards the bomb hole. Somebody off there, lots of dust. Soil goes flying, and somewhere in the middle of all of that is Ben Samuelson. TVR's very own PR man has got a real headline to write about now. He sorts himself out. Ben gets back onto the circuit a long way and drifts as Richard Hay now is ahead of Philip Keane. Waving him through though, look, coming into Russell. Now has Richard Hay got a problem? He's taken the place off Philip Keane, but you could see him there waving Keane back through once again. Whether Richard's car suffered any damage in that squeeze at the start, he'll no doubt tell us at length after the race. The leaders go across the line. It is Mason ahead of Stanton then. In third place is Darren Dowling. For fourth, Philip Keane. And although Richard Hay has waved him through, he's not totally content just to sit there behind him. He was challenging again as they went into Riches. Up now they go towards Sear Corner. Top three getting away. Keane fourth, Hay fifth. Very important here that Richard Hay scores points, having failed to finish in either race at Donington. And he won't be at Croft because he'll be off doing his testing for the Le Mans 24 Hours. Now for the lead, all of a sudden Richard Stanton has joined in the party. He wants to get past David Mason. Stanton has never won in a Tuscan. We've had 2 races this year with 2 first-time winners. Can we make it 3 in a row? It's Mason versus Stanton now as they turn their way through the bomb hole on towards Coram Curve. Darren Dowling has led. David Mason is leading. Can Richard Stanton find a way through? He was rather distant early on in the race, but now he's right there bidding for victory. Out of Coram Curve they come, down towards Russell. Stanton stands on the brakes. The nose drops, the car turns right and left and right again, up through Russell, and now heading up towards the start and finish line. Third in the background, Darren Dowling. Fourth, Philip Keane. Fifth, Richard Hay. And across the line they go with now Richard Stanton making a bid on the outside. Side by side, heading up towards the right-hander of Riches. David Mason stands his ground though. Number 2, David Mason leads. Number 99, Richard Stanton, right up behind him and still looking for a gap. Mason sits in the middle of the road. Stanton goes through on the inside, does he? Locks up, drifts through, gets it sideways and spins. Richard Stanton led for a split second. Now he's facing the wrong way. Oh dear. He's not going to score a first-time win, certainly in this race. Richard Stanton gets back onto the circuit. That's going to drop him, what, to 5th place possibly now. In the meantime, this is Philip Keane's view, coming into the S's, and he's got problems as well. No drive, no gears. Keep stirring, Philip. Nothing there, though. Not entirely sure all that's doing the engine a great deal of good, and in the end, Philip Keane decides that enough is enough. So, Richard Stanton spins out, Philip Keane clambers out, and he's not a happy man at all. It had been a good race for Philip Keane. Here's a replay of Richard Stanton briefly getting the lead. He goes one way, he goes the other. He has to brake so late to get through. He just runs out of traction. Round comes the back, and round he goes. This is David Mason. He comes into Russell. Ahead of him then is number 11, Nigel Tuscan, who waves him to one side. David Mason will blast past, or will he, on the run to the checkered flag? There's no need. David Mason can win now. He takes the checkered flag. He doesn't have to get past Tuscan, as Darren Dowling just hangs on to 2nd place. Richard Hay finishing 3rd. 4th over the line, a rather red-faced Richard Stanton. And Tim Hood hangs on to 5th, coming home just ahead of Ben Samuelson. 7th is Wayne Phelan. 8th goes to Jan Persson. 9th, despite a spin, Pete Osborne. And the top 10 rounded out by Rod Barrett. But David Mason, the winner.
Basically, me and Darren were neck and neck into the first corner. He tucked in behind, save an accident, and it was hard racing from then on. Really, it was good though, good fun, good close racing.
After 2 laps, the gearbox was failing to go into 3rd, so David was catching me up no end at the end of the Revit straight, and then the final straw was coming out of the chicane. I couldn't even get into 2nd, getting any gears at all. The baffles went at the same time. So I was probably down about 50 brake horsepower because the cars were just catching me up no end down the straights, and I couldn't get into gear, so it was hard to keep it in 2nd.
Race 2 coming up to the grid. This is the longer race at 15 laps. It has David Mason on pole position, having won earlier in the day, and Darren Dowling lining up alongside him. The 2nd row, Richard Hay on the inside, Richard Stanton alongside him. The 3rd row, Tim Hood and Ben Samuelson. The lights are red, the lights are green, the race is underway. Not many of them exactly rocket away from the line, but as they head off down towards Riches, the best start of all is made by David Mason. Darren Dowling is 2nd, Richard Hay slotting in behind him in 3rd place. In fourth is a good start from Ben Samuelson, and Lee Caroline, who started flat last in number 38, is the man to watch here. Philip Keane was penultimate on the grid, and he's going for it. And just look at Lee Caroline's blue and white car there, diving up on the inside. He's in the midfield already. 15 cars starting the race. Let's see how far up the order Lee Caroline can get. The leaders then come down the Revitt straight on lap 1, and in the lead is Mason, side by side for second, Dowling and Hay. Fourth is Hood, in fifth place, looked like being Ben Samuelson, and Richard Hay squeezes past, up into second place. Lee Caroline sixth already, from 15th on the grid. He's sixth, no he's not, he's fifth in half a lap. Fantastic! Lee Caroline storming his way through the field here. On towards Coram Curve, can he get past Tim Hood before the end of the lap? Possibly, given the way that he's going. David Mason then leading. Race 1 winner, Richard Hay is second. In third place is Darren Dowling. Fourth is Tim Hood. Fifth at the end of lap 1 from last on the grid, Lee Caroline. In sixth place is Ben Samuelson. In seventh place is Richard Stanton. Eighth is Hugh Marshall in the background. In ninth is Philip Keane. 10th is Jan Persson as they come across the line. Something flapping underneath Hugh Marshall's car. Philip Keane then, that mechanical problem forcing him out of race 1, going through, gaining a place on the outside. Braking very late, turning his way into Riches. But Lee Caroline here in fifth place and looking to try and make more progress before the end of the Revitt straight. He's getting up onto the back now of Tim Hood's car. Down they go, underneath the vehicle bridge in a moment. And then it'll be hard on the brakes, turning left into the S's. Race leaders, nose to tail. Mason just ahead, and there Tim Hood's car quivering under braking. Lee Caroline goes through fourth in a lap and a half from 15th on the grid. Excellent drive this, clips the curb. Richard Stanton there going through in sixth place with Ben Samuelson, and then Philip Keane behind him. Next up, Jan Persson, Hugh Marshall, the next black car there of TVR dealer Rod Barrett. And then behind him, as the cars accelerate into the bomb hole, is Wayne Phelan. Replay here of the start. Pete Osborne sets off, gets alongside a rather slow starting Wayne Phelan. They almost touch, they do touch. Pete Osborne has to back out of it, and Wayne Phelan storms ahead. Race leaders, David Mason and Richard Hay for third place. Look at this, Lee Caroline comes barrelling up on the inside. He goes through, does he? He takes the curb almost onto the grass there, swings the car across the front of Darren Dowling, who drifts across the road to try and avoid making contact. But Lee Caroline at his forceful finest here takes third place. That was a very brave move. Scrabbled through on the inside, used all the road, a bit of the curb. He takes third place, leaves Darren Dowling to make his own arrangements. And so the race order now is Mason, Hay, then Caroline. Fourth is Dowling, fifth is Hood, up towards Sear Corner. The two cars come nose to tail now for third place. Caroline being caught and challenged again by Darren Dowling. And while they're doing this, Tim Hood is not that far adrift either in fifth place. Race leaders then, down towards the S's. This time Richard Hay challenging on the outside. Can he go right round the outside? Yes, he can. Fantastic move. Richard Hay takes over the lead. He thumps the curb. He gets up onto two wheels. Can David Mason fight back? Let's see as Darren Dowling retakes third place. Lee Caroline slips to fourth now. Has he got a problem? Let's see. In fifth place is Tim Hood. The cars now making their way up towards the right-hander of Coram. Caroline squeezed onto the grass there. All four wheels almost behind the white line. Keeps his foot in though. He's going to come out of the corner alongside Dowling. He's going to go through back into third place, and he deserves to. That was a very brave effort. He kept his foot in right the way around Coram. It was being squeezed by Darren Dowling, but Lee Caroline takes over third place. Now let's see whether he can get away from Dowling. In fifth place there is Hood. Darren Dowling fighting back, and Tim Hood looking for a gap between the pair of them. Can we get them three abreast going into Riches? No, we can't. Caroline hangs on to third. Dowling fourth, Hood fifth. And Richard Stanton behind them in sixth place. Four of them now battling for third place. Lee Caroline, remember, had a throttle linkage problem in the first race. He started last on the grid. He's now third. He's got Darren Dowling and then Tim Hood and then Richard Stanton behind him. For the lead, Richard Hay and David Mason still squabbling, but I think possibly now Richard Hay is making his escape. Yes, he is on this lap. Look, David Mason has lost a lot of time coming down the Revitt straight. He's being caught by Caroline, who's being passed by Dowling. Replay of David Mason coming into Russell, turning his way into the corner. Can't find any gears, listen. Finds one eventually. And by the sound of it, he's stuck in it as well. It's a gearbox problem for David Mason now. Can he get the car to the end? As we've got Dowling and Caroline side by side. Lee Caroline going back through. That gives him third place once again. Next target is the ailing car of David Mason. So Richard Hay pulling away from everybody else now with great ease. David Mason is second. Caroline is third. Dowling is fourth. But Lee Caroline now on the inside of David Mason coming down the Revitt straight. No, he's not, because Darren Dowling gets a mammoth toe there. And he goes ahead of Caroline and almost goes ahead of Mason. David Mason's going to have to make this car incredibly wide for the remaining few laps of this race. Darren Dowling gets a little bit crossed up. He's still got Lee Caroline behind him. Dowling taken to the dirt on the inside at the bomb hole. Through he goes. Mason is hung out to dry on the outside there. Caroline gets up into third place. Tim Hood has arrived on the scene in fourth. Richard Stanton's about to become fifth, and David Mason still stuck in gear, heading down towards Russell, watching all these quicker, healthy cars go streaming past him. He's going to lose even more time, of course, coming out of a slow corner like this without the ability to change up and down through the gears. And you can see that everybody else says, bye-bye, we're off. They pull away up the pit straight. And although David Mason is still going, and he should just about get the car to the end and therefore take points for doing so, he really is struggling now. Tim Hood going really well here then in the black car, as in the meantime the two teammates, Rod Barrett and Jan Persson, arrive side by side. Persson gets all sideways, goes across the grass, slides back onto the circuit, and Wayne Phelan spins. It was Jan Persson that made the mistake. Wayne Phelan loses it. A case of Phelan embarrassed possibly now. He's back in the right direction. Pete Osborne has got ahead of him. In the background you can see Peter Wheeler, the TVR chairman, coming over the line. And the InWeb insane racing car of Wayne Phelan carries on, albeit a fair few places lost now. Darren Dowling making his way then now out of the S's. Behind him you can see Richard Stanton. This is the fight for third place now. Tim Hood is next in the queue. He's fifth. And looking to see what progress Philip Keane is making. Where's Tim Hood going? Suddenly the car swings to the right, coming out of the bomb hole. Goes all across the grass. Not the most common of places to find somebody having a spin, that. Tim Hood survives it, but that won't have done his tyres any good, and it also now gives Philip Keane fourth place. David Mason is still soldiering on. Ben Samuelson catching up to him and taking with him Rod Barrett and Jan Persson after their moment a little while ago. Dowling and Stanton. This is the fight now for third place, remember. Richard Stanton through on the inside. Now has Darren Dowling got a problem? He doesn't seem to be able to retaliate there, so Richard Stanton is heading for the podium. Clatters across the curb, coming into Russell, and this is Philip Keane. He's getting closer all the way to Darren Dowling, who is very slow coming out of Russell, and Darren Dowling's going to park it, I think. Yes, he is. He's heading for the pit lane. Something has gone terminally wrong for Darren Dowling. The car parks on the grass. He's not even going to get into the pit lane there. Darren Dowling is no more. He clambers out of the car. That is his race run. The leader then is Richard Hay. Further back, David Mason now is trying to fend off Ben Samuelson. David Mason willing the number of laps to be less than 15, but it's not going to happen for him. With every passing lap, he's in danger of losing yet more places. Past him now goes Ben Samuelson, and that will put Ben up into the top six. Mason is down to 7th. Will he be able to hang on in there? He'll be okay coming out of the quicker corners. It's really the run out of the S's, and particularly out of Russell, that really goes against him. Race leader then, Richard Hay, on his way now down towards the right-hander of Coram. Ahead of him is Peter Wheeler, soon to be lapped. The two of them then now make their way down towards Russell. Richard Hay having a go on the inside, trying to find a way through. He does find a way through. Peter Wheeler keeps out of the way. And so Richard Hay now turning his way out of Russell up across the start and finish line. The checkered flag this time. For the first time this year, Richard Hay will win a round at the Carlube TVR Tuscan Challenge, and he does so in style. Over the line he comes. Richard Hay wins. Second from the back of the grid is Lee Caroline, and Richard Stanton is going to come through to take third place. Philip Keane from the penultimate slot on the grid will take fourth. Tim Hood, a good drive for fifth. And this man, Ben Samuelson, is going to take sixth, with David Mason soldiering on for 7th. Rod Barrett is 8th. In 9th place behind him is Jan Persson. And ahead of Ben Samuelson this time is Nigel Tuscan as they come into Russell. Tuscan is a lap behind. Ben Samuelson powers past him. Is David Mason going to lose another place before the line? I think he's safe. Ben Samuelson takes 6th. Waves to his legion of fans, both of them as he crosses the line. David Mason hangs on to 7th. And in 8th place, Rod Barrett. 9th goes the way of the Swede, Jan Persson, and Hugh Marshall rounds out the top 10. But Richard Hay wins by quite a margin.
There's a lot of oil down, and that concentrates the mind a lot. So just making sure that nothing went wrong on the oil and trying to keep the gap steady.
I mean, the first opening 2 laps, I couldn't believe how much ground I made. I thought, I'm just all or nothing. I mean, you should really think about the championship, but it was all or nothing. So about midway when I caught Darren Dowling, my tyres started going off, so I had to stay back for a few laps, let them come back on, and then it was just chase Richard down, but unfortunately he just got that little bit too far away.
I thought I did a pretty poor start actually, and had a terrible start of the race. But yeah, it was good actually, and I managed to pick the pace up at the end, but not quick enough.
So this is how the championship looks after 2 rounds. David Mason is the leader with Richard Stanton second. Ben Samuelson is now third. Lee Caroline slips to fourth ahead of Hugh Marshall, and then Jan Persson in sixth. This week we're at Croft in North Yorkshire for the typical 2 races, the sprint and the feature race. And the entry this week boosted by 1 or 2 new names. Tim Bartlett joins in, so also does Charlie Kemp. But David Mason is the man who leads the championship with Richard Stanton away at Le Mans this weekend second and Ben Samuelson third. But the man that's fourth in the championship and has a lot of work to do is the man on pole position for race 1, Lee Caroline.
Yeah, well, I mean, we worked hard in practice to get the car right. It felt real good, and we put the new tyres on halfway through the session and bagged pole, so good.
Not quite so good for the man alongside him, the championship leader, David Mason.
Lee was about, I think he was 5/10 of a second quicker than us in testing. Even that we wouldn't have been too worried about, but we've picked up a bit more pace, and it should be interesting for the race. We're both on the front row and anything can happen.
Another man to watch will line up third on the grid. From Formula Renault to TVR, Phil Keane.
Yeah, reasonably pleased. We struggled in free practice this morning. The car's okay. I think there's a bit more to be done, but yeah, I think we're there or thereabouts. So see how it goes tomorrow.
The sprint race then about to get underway. This is over 8 laps. The grid complete. Away they go with Lee Caroline making a really bad start from pole position. David Mason gets away. We're on board with Ben Samuelson on the run down towards Clevo Corner. It's Mason leading, Keane second, Darren Dowling third, and Ben Samuelson squeezes up on the inside. Dreadful start for the pole position man. Lee Caroline then turns through fifth. He's left himself with a lot of work to do as David Mason is already getting away. Look, from Phil Keane in second place. Dowling third as the rest of the field turns its way through the chicane for the first time. Pete Osborne in 51 going through there. We're on board though now with Rod Barrett, the Hawthorn dealer. He runs Hawthorn's TVR dealership and he comes into Tower Bend. He turns into the right-hander now. Ahead of him is Osborne. Rod Barrett feeds in the power. The cars accelerate out of the right-hander through the Jim Clark S's down towards Barcroft. Big moment for Darren Dowling. Round goes the back across the circuit and off he goes. Very lucky that didn't result in any damage at all. He's gone way off into the field there, you can see, but Darren Dowling, that was a big old wild ride and he was very lucky not to get collected there. Sorts himself out, carries on as in the meantime the leaders come into the complex with Lee Caroline, the man on the move, trying to get past Ben Samuelson, but Samuelson, much improved driver these days, defending well. The former pickup truck champion, Lee Caroline, tucked up behind TVR's PR man. Into the hairpin. Lee Caroline lunges up on the inside. He should take third. He does take third. Out of the corner, Lee Caroline runs up alongside Ben Samuelson, who fights back there. Side by side across the line. Samuelson on the inside, Lee Caroline on the outside line, into Clervaux Corner. Who breaks later? Is it going to be Ben? Is it going to be Lee? Ben Samuelson just takes the place, but Lee Caroline goes right around the outside of it. What a move! The man who started on pole position, recovering from his bad start, Lee Caroline, now goes third. He's heading to the chicane. He's hunting down the 2 ahead of him, namely the leader, David Mason, and up behind him in second place, Phil Keane. The leaders come into Tower, but Lee Caroline inexorably now closing the gap in 5th place, going well as he did here last year, is Tim Hood. Ben Samuelson then in the Ian McKellar championship winning car comes out of Tower. He makes the run down to the Jim Clark S's. Mason looking to get away from Phil Keane. David Mason clipping the curbs there. Lee Caroline right on the limit. Tim Hood hunting down Ben Samuelson as well now. On board with Rod Barrett, left and then right through the Jim Clark S's. Turn right through Barcroft and then set the cars up for this double apex right-hander of Sonny in and Sonny out. Peter Wheeler, the TVR chairman, fending off Pete Osborne. Then Rod Barrett, and then tucked up behind him is Wayne Phelan. Lawrence Tomlinson there, had a couple of outings in the championship last season, taking over Jan Persson's car for this weekend. Tomlinson coming up to the complex, then the Wheeler, Osborne, Barrett, Phelan battle going on behind. Turn left, turn right, into the complex. Pete Osborne right up behind the TVR chairman, Peter Wheeler. Osborne having a look up the inside, but he can't find a way by there. And Peter Wheeler, 20 years ago, he took the helm of TVR. He's made the company a great success ever since, and he enjoys his racing. And here is one of his staff on board with Ben Samuelson, looking at Darren Dowling, having his big lap 1 slide ahead of us. The car drifts off to the left, round comes the back, it spins across the circuit, and Darren Dowling, as I said at the time, lucky that didn't involve anybody else. Now the fight's on for second. The leader, David Mason, is getting away here, and very definitely now Phil Keane is being caught by Lee Caroline. Keane's car looking ever so twitchy there, going through the Jim Clark S's. Lee Caroline using all of the road. Now they turn right through Barcroft, touch the curb. There's a gap on the inside at Sunny. Caroline up on the inside, breaks late, scrabbles by. Lee Caroline goes second. That was a good incisive move, and through he goes. To the complex. Mason, Caroline, Keane, Samuelson is the top four. Now, can Lee Caroline do anything about the race leader, David Mason? The pace that he's evinced so far suggests that yes, he can. He's just starting to inch away from Keane. A sideways Mason thunders out of the hairpin this time. Lee Caroline second, Phil Keane third as they accelerate now up over the line. And you can see the gap is opening up between second and third, and it's coming down between the leader, David Mason, and Lee Caroline. In a sense, that bad start has helped the race for us because Lee Caroline, in fight back, has been great to watch. There's Phil Keane, he's third. His best showing of the season in the Carloop TVR Tuscan Challenge as he accelerates now on up towards the chicane. He accelerates his way over the old start and finish line, heading now towards the right-hander of Tower, but ahead of him, Lee Caroline is certainly now bringing down the gap between himself and Mason. Into Tower they come. There you can see the Colin Blower Motorsport prepared car of Lee Caroline in second place. Rob Barrett there, further back in the Hawthorns Motorsport car, another Blower prepared car, and he's setting off now in pursuit once more of Pete Osborne. Peter Wheeler has broken away from the pair of them. Up the inside comes Barrett, he's all locked up, he's on the grass, he loses it, lucky not to collect Osborne. And Rod Barrett rotates, he manages to avoid anything solid. Fires the car up again, hopefully, he does. Gets himself back towards the tarmac. He rejoins the race just ahead of number 3, Hugh Marshall, David Mason's CDL teammate you saw in the background there. So Rod Barrett, after a wild ride, back in the race. This 8-lap race coming towards its conclusion as the leader, David Mason, is still working hard to fend off Lee Caroline. They come into the complex this time around with Mason locking up. That's not going to help his efforts much. Swinging his way up now towards the hairpin, and Lee Caroline, looking the neater and the tidier of the two, is right with Mason, who again is very spectacular, but losing speed as he flings the car sideways out of the hairpin. Across the line they go now. Mason versus Caroline, the top two in the championship, running together on the track now. Lee Caroline, the quicker of the two. He's done the best lap at an average of over 91 miles an hour. He's neater, he's smoother, he's tidier, he's closing. He's now bidding for the lead. The two cars nose to tail, and a twitchy David Mason leaves the door open. Here comes Lee Caroline up on the inside. He goes through. Caroline takes over the lead. Lee Caroline, the man from pole, a bad start, but he now leads the race. David Mason chasing after him in second, but I don't think, I'm afraid, that Mason's going to be able to do much to respond. He's had the lead eroded, he's lost the lead, so surely now he hasn't got the pace to be able to match Lee Caroline around Croft. Mason putting a wheel or two onto the curb on the outside of the road. Left and right, into and out of the Jim Clark S's comes Lee Caroline. He's heading for a victory, it seems now, unless he makes a mistake. He goes into the right-hander of Barcroft, and here's a replay of how he took the lead. Braking late, going into Clairvaux corner. Down comes the gap as they approach the right-hander of Hawthorn. Mason's car twitches, he corrects it, but he runs wide, he leaves the door wide open, and Lee Caroline needs no second invitation. Through he goes, up on the inside. Last lap, Lee Caroline coming into Sunny. A great recovery after that bad start, and he's made the race for us. In second place, David Mason, who's not fallen that far adrift here, but certainly he can't fight back. It's Lee Caroline heading now up towards the complex for the last time. He's had a win at Donington. He's going to come through to win, it seems, here as well. Turning his way now into the complex. Turns left, turns right, then left again into the hairpin. David Mason still sliding the car around, shadowing Lee Caroline up towards the checkered flag. Out of the hairpin, pointed in a straight line. Accelerate up to the line, up to the checkered flag, up to victory. Lee Caroline wins the sprint race at Croft in the Carloop TVR Tuscan Challenge, with David Mason coming home in second place. Over the line for third is going to be Phil Keane, and fourth will be Ben Samuelson. He's just ahead of Tim Hood, who hangs on to fifth, and Lawrence Tomlinson to round out the top six. Lee Caroline very happy with his race win. Phil Keane taking his best TVR Tuscan result so far. Rest of the top 10, Peter Wheeler 7th ahead of the recovering Dowling, then Pete Osborne and Wayne Phelan. But Lee Caroline's your winner.
I was sleeping on the start. Let it go down as one of the worst starts ever, I think. But I had the in-car camera, so I thought I might as well give you some excitement. I took Mason into the chicane over there, which was quite tight, but it was a good race.
Anything's possible between me and Lee. We're both taking various routes round. But I thought he'd probably go for the tighter line because there's not much grip on the outside of this track. There's a lot of excess rubber and bits of gravel and stuff out the gravel traps. But yeah, it was a good clean overtaking manoeuvre, so quite happy with that.
I'm a bit disappointed. The car wasn't brilliant in that race. I just let the other two go really and wrecked their tyres and saved mine for the feature race, but I think we've got quite a bit to find.
We're ready for the feature race of round 3 of the Carlube TVR Tuscan Challenge. This is the longer of the 2 races at 10 laps. The grid formed up. We're on board with Rob Barrett. The lights are red. Engine notes rise. Lights go to green. Away they go. Good start by Barrett, getting alongside Wayne Phelan, and the cars run down to the first corner with another bad start by Lee Caroline, just as he did in the sprint races. Mason leading. Good start by Ben Samuelson to go second. Third is Phil Keane. Lee Caroline fourth. Darren Dowling, a good start from him, fifth. The cars turn their way out of Hawthorne up towards the chicane for the first time. But again, Lee Caroline caught napping at the start. Well, he was able to fight back and win the shorter distance sprint race. Can he do the same in the feature race? Hugh Marshall, David Mason's teammate, heading up towards the right-hander of Tower. It's Mason leading. Second is Samuelson. Third is Phil Keane. And there, number 38 is the man to watch. Lee Caroline, who was on pole, made a bad start. And now, once again, he's in attack mode. Through the Jim Clark S's they go for the first time, heading now down towards Barcroft, then on towards Sunny. And David Mason getting away. Ben Samuelson in second place, holding up Phil Keane. And Keane has got Lee Caroline right up behind him. Turn right again. Power out of Sunny, and then accelerate up towards the complex. David Mason then the leader of the race at the moment, with Ben Samuelson second, coming under pressure. Phil Keane needs to get ahead and try to get away, but Ben Samuelson braving it out with him as they come into the complex side by side. Lee Caroline looking up the inside as well, but he can't find a way by. Keane goes a little bit wide coming out of the corner, but he's got the inside line for the hairpin. Lee Caroline's going to go around the outside of him there. Is that going to work? Let's see. Side by side round the corner. Caroline gets his nose in front. Another great move. Round the outside, that's his years of oval racing experience coming into play there. And Lee Caroline then is on the inside line for the next corner. He should go third. He does go third at the end of the straight. Lee Caroline goes ahead of Phil Keane, who did his best to try to fight back, but Lee Caroline then goes through, goes third, and his next target is Ben Samuelson. Coming into the chicane, Caroline clips the curve in and out of the chicane and makes the run now up along the straight towards Tower. He's had a win at Donington, he's had a win here earlier on in the day, and now he wants to get past the TVR PR man Ben Samuelson. He's going to have a look on the inside, thinks better of it. The door opened there, but Lee Caroline not really close enough to make a proper bid. In fourth is Keane, and he's coming under pressure now as well. You'll see in the background from Darren Dowling. Look at Caroline and Samuelson. Absolutely nose to tail, these two. Ben Samuelson in the purple car, the worked TVR engineering run car, just being able to fend off Lee Caroline, who has a run up on the inside. He should go through, up into second place. Lee Caroline cleanly passes on the inside at Sunny. Through the second part of the corner, accelerating now up towards the complex. You can see ahead of him is David Mason. We're on board though with Ben Samuelson, and Ben not yet falling away from Lee Caroline, goes a little bit deep into the complex. That allows Caroline to just break away slightly. Ben Samuelson turning his way through the complex into the hairpin now. Swing sharp left. Back onto the power, accelerating up across the line. Ben Samuelson up through the gears. He's going to come under pressure soon, and is coming under pressure now from Phil Keane. You can see that he's dropped a long way back already from the flying Lee Caroline. And now Ben coming under pressure from Phil Keane. The two of them run together into Clairvaux corner. Phil Keane tripping the curb, and Darren Dowling not that far adrift either, in fifth place in the insane racing run car. Darren Dowling had that monster spin, remember, in race one. Started 8th on the grid. He's up into 5th, and he's attacking all the time. He's starting now to close on Phil Keane ahead of him. Keane big, a little bit delayed possibly now by Ben Samuelson, and that's exactly what Dowling needs. The three of them are bunching up as they turn round Tower. In 6th place, Lawrence Tomlinson going really well in the quicker of the two Hawthorne's cars, the regular Jan Persson mount, and David Mason knows that the pressure is mounting. Caroline's getting closer, and you saw there how much of the curb David Mason was using, trying to straight line the Jim Clark S's and get away from Lee Caroline. Fight for third, nose to tail, coming now down towards Sunny. It's still Keane chasing after Ben Samuelson. Those two are nose to tail, and before long, Ben's going to have to work very hard indeed in order to have to keep Phil Keane behind him. Phil close enough now possibly to challenge into the complex, and Darren Dowling is getting ever closer as well in 5th place there. Lee Caroline turning his way through the complex, up now towards the hairpin. Down through the gears, swing sharp left, back onto the power. Samuelson third, Keane fourth, 5th is Dowling. Somebody off there, that's Pete Osborne. Hugh Marshall was involved by the look of it as well, and Pete Osborne not terribly impressed about all that. Pete Osborne off the circuit, takes the steering wheel off, clambers out of the car. It's not the work of a moment, this. Delicately, Pete Osborne threads himself between the roll cage, sprints away. Not sure I'd like to argue with him about that. Let's see what happened. Hugh Marshall drives number 3, Pete Osborne is in 51. They're approaching the complex. Hugh Marshall has a go on the inside. Pete Osborne turns in, there's no gap. Hugh Marshall makes one, turns Osborne around, gives him another knock for good measure. Phil Keane in the meantime looking for a way past Ben Samuelson on the inside. They both run wide. Ben all over the curb. Phil Keane goes through. Is there going to be a change as well? Darren Dowling looking for a way past Samuelson. Well, Keane goes third. What about for fourth? Ben Samuelson turning out of the chicane, just hanging onto the place. The rallying cross circuit to the right of them. Up towards Tower they go now. Fast part of the circuit this. Hard on the brakes, down through the gears, turn right, and although Darren Dowling is close in behind Ben, he's not yet close enough to have a go for fourth place. The leaders accelerating their way now down towards the Jim Clark S's once again. Up front, it's Mason versus Caroline. In third place now, Phil Keane. Ben Samuelson slips to fourth. Fifth is Darren Dowling. You still get the impression, looking at the way that Dowling is going, that he's going to get past Ben before much longer. Ben getting a bit untidy at Sunny there. Braked a fraction too late, has to wrestle the car round the corner, and all of that enables the smoother, quicker Dowling to get right onto terms with Ben Samuelson. Into the complex. Ben hard at work. Turns left, sets the car up, swings right. Making the run now up towards the hairpin. Race leaders across the line. Lee Caroline getting closer again that time around to David Mason. The fight's on for fourth though. They're virtually nose to tail over the line this time. Ben Samuelson fending off the efforts of Darren Dowling. Past the pits they go. Now, is Dowling going to have a go? Yes, he is on the outside line. It'll be a brave run if he can go all the way around Ben. He can't. He tucks to the inside line, coming in towards the right-hander of Hawthorne. Still, Ben Samuelson is not to be denied, and the two cars run nose to tail now. Heading into the chicane. Both cars looking a bit skittish as the power comes in out of the chicane, and now the run up towards Tower. Darren Dowling going great guns here, running in the wheel tracks of Ben Samuelson. Phil Keane getting away. I'm surprised in a way, though, that Dowling hasn't gone charging past Ben by now. He's been racing for longer. He's a very brave man at the best of times, Darren Dowling. He had that big spin, remember, in the first race, and Ben Samuelson clips the curb, coming into the Jim Clark S's, out of the S's. Big runoff area there, inviting those that run wide. Turn right into Barcroft, and Dowling still there, right in the wheel tracks, now having a look on the inside, but Ben comes across, leaves Dowling just enough room. They run together round the corner. Dowling's got the shorter, tighter, quicker line. Is he going to nose ahead coming out of the corner? Yes, but they touch, and off goes Dowling. Off he goes, hard into the barriers. Darren Dowling, Ben Samuelson make contact, and Darren Dowling gets back onto the circuit. He doesn't lose that much time considering what he's been through, but the tyre has gone down. Look, the right rear tyre is flat, and Darren Dowling turning his way into the complex. Mr. Samuelson, sir, what was all that about? Out of the hairpin, Ben accelerating up towards the line. The car looking a bit battle-scarred at the front, but the TVR PR man there, not necessarily giving the best service to the customer. Darren Dowling heads into the pit lane. The two of them, they came side by side out of Sunny. Contact made, and Dowling came worst off. And this is how it all looked. We're on board with Ben Samuelson, coming out of the corner. Darren Dowling to the right of us. He tries to take the line coming out of the corner, goes around the front of Ben's car, and off into the barrier he heads. Another replay. On the inside, Dowling going for the gap there. The two of them run together out of the corner, accelerating up the straight now. Darren Dowling tries to cut across and take the line. He runs into the side of Samuelson's car. The two touch, and round into the Armco goes Darren Dowling. The two leaders then, down towards Sunny, David Mason and Lee Caroline. That gap has come right down, and now look, you can see Lee Caroline is tucked up behind David Mason. It's virtually a repeat of what we saw in race one. Caroline's bad start, then he hunts down the rest of the pack, and now he makes his bid into the complex. He's on the outside line, but he can't get the lead here yet. David Mason using all of the road, trying to keep him at bay. Coming now down through the complex, heading to the hairpin. Nose to tail these two cars. Up on the inside, Lee Caroline looking for a way past the wide-running Mason. Through he goes, up on the inside line. A place gain. Number 38, Lee Caroline, goes ahead this time of David Mason, and the two of them run across the line, heading now down towards Clevo Corner. Can Mason fight back? He's going to have a jolly good go. Look on the outside line, but Lee Caroline knows exactly how to defend. He hangs on to the advantage. The two of them accelerate round Hawthorne. A flick left and right through the chicane. They come now along the straight, blasting down towards Tower. Caroline not getting away from Mason. David Mason knows that he's got to try and retaliate now. He's going to have a go coming into Tower. Lee Caroline defends well. His attention glued to his mirrors, coming up towards Tower. Turn right. Mason right behind Caroline. He has led and he wants to lead back. 2-2 in the championship in terms of wins. 2 to Caroline, 2 to Mason. On board with Rod Barrett here as well. Turning his way through the chicane. Last lap though we're on now, and Lee Caroline, the man in charge. David Mason still going after him as best he can. Rod Barrett on his way though, up towards Tower. He's got behind him Wayne Phelan, who's not yet close enough to have a go, but he's doing his level best to get onto terms with Barrett. Turning right, out of the corner, now the run, down towards the S's. Here are the leaders for the last time, coming up towards the hairpin. Lee Caroline is going to take a third win in the Carlube TVR Tuscan Challenge. He comes out of the corner, again a big slide for David Mason, but Lee Caroline, after a great day in North Yorkshire, wins the feature race of the Carlube TVR Tuscan Challenge. Second over the line is David Mason, and coming through for third, well, is it going to be Keane? Is it going to be Samuelson? It's going to be Phil Keane. Another good day for him. 2 third places. Phil Keane there takes the checkered flag. He finishes third. Ben Samuelson will come across the line for fourth. Fifth goes to Lawrence Tomlinson and Rod Barrett sixth. And Darren Dowling does get back out again after his pit stop, but only in 13th place. So they're the top 10, but Lee Caroline makes it 2 races and 2 wins here at Croft.
Yeah, another lazy start. Give me all the work to do again, but once I got in his mirror sight, I just wound him in the last 3-4 laps, so it was a good race, but he took some catching.
As long as we're in the top 3, I think it's going to be difficult for others to catch up. But it's, yeah, if we keep it on the track, we don't have to win everything, but it will obviously help towards the championship points.
And that's what we needed, because we're quite a way down the points now, because we haven't had much reliability. But I'm afraid we're still quite a way off, so we've got a bit of work to do for next week at Knockhill.
This is how the championship looks heading to Scotland. David Mason leads Lee Caroline, Ben Samuelson third ahead of Phil Keane, Peter Wheeler and then Wayne Phelan rounding out the top 6. The Carlube TVR Tuscan Challenge this week heads north of the border. This is round 4, this is Knockhill in Scotland, and the championship becoming a battle between David Mason and Lee Caroline. Around Knockhill, though, you can be certain of various things. Mason and Caroline are going to be up there, chased by Ben Samuelson, who's third in the championship, and he's somebody that always goes well at this circuit. The other things you can be assured of, though, are close racing and unpredictable weather, and that was exactly the case in qualifying. It all started wet, some drivers were brave and went early onto dry tyres, amongst them, for third on the grid, David Mason.
Put some wets on, drive round, we've got to do our 3 laps, so at least we've qualified. Basically weren't fast enough in the wet anyway. Fortunately it started drying out. We left the car on its wet settings on the suspension, but just put the slicks on. So obviously I was struggling to get a decent lap time in the dry when there was a dry line. So yeah, third's good enough for that, I think.
But a best ever second on the grid is Ben Samuelson, and no one's quite sure how he did it.
By praying for weather that would just confuse the hell out of everybody else and enable me to get a fluky lap in at the end.
But the man on pole position is a man that's had trouble with his starts this year. It's Lee Caroline.
Well, if you've been watching me, you know pole means nothing really. As by the first corner, I probably would have messed my start up. But it is important, pole here, because it's very hard to overtake. But I've just got to work on getting away now from the line. So.
This is the sprint race, 12 laps around Knockhill. The front of the grid then, Lee Caroline and Ben Samuelson. Will Lee Caroline get a good start? No, he won't. Ben Samuelson makes a tremendous getaway. David Mason finds a way past Lee Caroline as well. Caroline defends the in-web car of Darren Dowling for third place. But Ben Samuelson then, TVR's PR guru, leads as they go round Duffers Dip for the first time. David Mason tucks in behind him in second place. Lee Caroline is third. Fourth is Darren Dowling. Fifth is Richard Hay. Sixth is Phil Keane. And then seventh is Tim Hood. The cars climb up through the chicane for the first time, and it's Ben Samuelson then ahead of Mason. A very sideways Darren Dowling there coming out of the chicane, gets all crossed up, and Richard Hay attacking him now on the inside line, coming into Clark Curve. Can he go through there side by side there? Ben Samuelson then up front as they come up towards the hairpin, with Lee Caroline now attacking for second place. He's on the inside line coming into the braking area. Can he find a way by under braking? Yes, he can! Lunges up the inside, the two of them almost lean on each other coming out of the corner. Lee Caroline goes second then as they power their way now up across the line. Great move. Lee Caroline and David Mason side by side past the pits. Caroline's got the inside line for the next corner. Through he goes, breaks a fraction later. He's got the quicker, tighter line, and now Lee Caroline goes second. His next target is Ben Samuelson, who's led for a lap And Samuelson now is coming under pressure as they come through McIntyre's. Richard Hay, only 5th at the moment. His next target, Darren Dowling. But Ben Samuelson leads. I rather fear, though, that before long he's going to get gobbled up by Lee Caroline, who's closing fast. That's Tim Hood coming out of the chicane. Behind him is Jan Persson, and he's got himself ahead of Phil Keane now. On board with Persson, the London-based Swede, turn right through Clark, climb uphill, use all of the curve on the outside of the road. Meantime, this the fight for 4th place. Darren Dowling just ahead of Richard Hay as they come into the hairpin. Hay, the former Caterham champion, tucked up behind Dowling, his arch rival from last year. And here is a replay of Richard Hay's start. Not a brilliant getaway. A couple of cars get past him. Richard eventually finds a right gear, levels with Darren Dowling, but he's on the outside line going into Duffer's Dip. And he slips back into 5th place through the very tight first sequence of corners. This for the lead, though. Ben Samuelson's tenure of office is about to come to an end. Lee Caroline up on the inside line into the hairpin. Caroline breaks a little bit later. He's got the tighter line. He's got the lead as well. A valiant defence by Ben Samuelson, but it's not to be. Lee Caroline then asserts himself. The pole position man leads at Knock Hill. 2nd is Ben Samuelson, still going better than ever before, though. And in 3rd place is David Mason. 4th is Dowling. 5th is Hay. Samuelson fighting back. Look at this. Right on the tail of Lee Caroline going down the hill. There's a gap on the inside there. Can Ben take it? No, he can't. And David Mason is joining in as well now. Only a dozen cars started this Car Loop TVR Tuscan Challenge race, would you believe? But it's giving us some tremendous racing as we've got 3 for the lead now. Caroline, Mason, sandwiching Ben Samuelson as they turn into Clark Curve. David Mason, he's had a win or 2 this year. Lee Caroline has had more wins than anybody. Ben Samuelson's yet to win. He's yet to finish on the podium. He's 2nd at the moment, and they're almost overlapping for 4th place behind as well. Heading now down to the hairpin. Mason, right on the tail of Ben Samuelson. They accelerate now out of the corner. Lee Caroline in this car prepared by his father this year rather than Colin Blower that prepared it last year, and it's working well. He comes across the line being urged on. He comes over the line on the inside line now for 2nd place is Ben Samuelson, but David Mason tries to go around the outside of him. Ben hangs on in there. Through on the inside again. Ben Samuelson keeps his 2nd place. For 4th, Darren Dowling still fending off Richard Hay as a rather scrappy David Mason locks up that time going into McIntyre's. Up through the chicane, Lee Caroline clattering over the curb, drifting a little bit wide, coming out of the corner. Caroline, remember, won the 2 races at Croft. He won 1 at Donington. David Mason had a win at Donington and a win at Snetterton as well. Richard Hay won at Snetterton, missed the Croft races because he was away testing for the Le Mans 24 Hours. And now I think Hay, yes, he has got himself up into 4th place at the expense of Darren Dowling. It's been a rather subdued Richard Hay in this race so far, which makes me think that maybe the car has a problem. He's normally up there bidding for a win, but at the moment he's a rather distant 4th. Lee Caroline leads as he comes across the line now with still 2nd. A great effort this by Ben Samuelson to fend off the quicker David Mason. Mason looking for a way by as they turn right through Duffer's Dip now, plunge downhill. Samuelson under real pressure. Mason tries the outside line. When Ben Samuelson started off in the championship, he was the butt of the jokes. He was rather unfairly seen as somebody making up the numbers at the back of the grid. Well, he's learnt a lot since then. He's come on a great deal as a driver, and now Ben Samuelson, you can rather see this for yourselves, is very much one of the front runners in the championship. He's ahead of David Mason, and Mason getting all scrappy now, using all of the curb coming out of Clark Curve that time. Samuelson defending well. Look, he's on the inside line as they come down to the hairpin. If Mason wants to go by, he's going to have to go the long way round on the outside, but he's going to try it, is he? Yes, he is going to try it. He sits right alongside Samuelson's purple car. They come out of the corner. They almost touch there. Richard Hay closing a little bit in 4th place now. Over the line goes Lee Caroline. Here for 2nd and 3rd, past the pits. Ben Samuelson on the inside line. The car quivering under braking. David Mason a bit more stable. His car on the outside line. They're still side by side right the way through Duffer's Dip into McIntyre's. Turn right now. Ben Samuelson is 2nd again. A tap in the tail. Mason just leaning on him a little bit there. These 2 cars incredibly close, and Richard Hay is joining in the fun as well now. The 3 of them absolutely together, making their way along the straight towards the right-hander of Clark. And Samuelson, who's done a tremendous job of defending, he's no idea what's happening in front of him. He spent so much time looking in his mirror. He can see clearly that Mason is tucked up behind him, and that's Darren Dowling's teammate Wayne Phelan going through ahead of the circuit owner, Derek Butcher, having his first ever TVR Tuscan race. He's only done 3 laps out of session to qualify the car for this race, and Derek Butcher working his way up now into the top 10. Having a look on the inside, he goes through! Derek Butcher gains 9th place. Good move on the inside. Well, if anybody knows their way around the circuit, it's Derek, who's done an awful lot of good for this place since he bought it. And he's still learning about a TVR Tuscan. The 4.5 litre sports car built in Blackpool. They have this Speed 8 4.5 litre engine, and through upper place goes Derek Butcher. As meantime, look at this, second, third, fourth and fifth now running together, because Darren Dowling has caught Hay once again. Mason looking for a way around the outside of Ben Samuelson. Lee Caroline is long gone, but a tremendous tussle going on here. Look at this. Ben Samuelson on target, even if he only finishes third for his best ever Tuscan result. Is he going to hang on to second place? Mason breaks later, he goes ahead. Ben Samuelson locks up though, slides a little bit wide coming into the corner. Mason goes right round the outside of him now. Richard Hay looking to try and fend off Dowling and attack the two ahead. Phil Keane is sixth and sideways coming out of the hairpin. Across the line though come the top 3, 4, 5 cars now. Samuelson on the inside line, is he going to hang on to his second place? He is! Ben has learned well at Knock Hill. This is a great effort. He just sits on the inside line and David Mason struggles to find a way past him. Darren Dowling now attacking Richard Hay as well as they come out of McIntyre's. Through Butchers, up through the chicane. David Mason's car looking a bit twitchy that time. Turning their way through the right-hander of Clark Curve. Richard Hay has dropped back just a little bit this time. Defending his position well though from Darren Dowling as again Mason attacks. He has a look up alongside Ben Samuelson. This time he goes through quicker, making his way through Clark Curve and up towards the Taylor's hairpin. Now into second place goes David Mason. Well, can Ben fight back? Accelerating out of the hairpin, climbing uphill. Lee Caroline leads. Second is David Mason. Third, being urged on, is Ben Samuelson. Richard Hay is fourth. Darren Dowling is fifth. Phil Keane is sixth as they start the last lap of the sprint race here at Knock Hill. There's Phil Keane, number 41, turning his way through Duffer's Dip, trying to catch up with those ahead. Phil, who doesn't know Knock Hill very well at all, not raced here before, doing a good job of hanging on in there in the top 6. Darren Dowling, though, still wants to get past Richard Hay through the chicane. This, the fight for fourth place, and Richard Hay just about being able to keep Darren Dowling behind him as they make their way now through Clark Curve. The leader, though, Lee Caroline, comes up to the hairpin for the last time. The man in form in this year's Carlube TVR Tuscan Challenge is going to win the sprint race. He's going to put himself on pole position for the feature race as well. The checkered flag beckons, and Lee Caroline then takes a fourth win of the year. He comes across the line to win here at Knock Hill. Second over the line is David Mason. Ben Samuelson is just going to hang on to third despite going wide at the hairpin, and coming over the line for fourth and fifth, Richard Hay and Darren Dowling. Phil Keane taking sixth with Jan Persson, Peter Wheeler, Derek Butcher and then Wayne Phelan set to round out the top 10. There is Derek Butcher catching right up onto the tail of Peter Wheeler though. This is for 8th place as they come almost side by side out of the hairpin. The two bosses, one of the company, one of the circuit, will just finish in the order. Wheeler ahead of Butcher. There's confirmation of the top 10. Lee Caroline wins by 4.4 seconds. Well, you've got to argue that the driver of the race, whisper it, was Ben Samuelson.
Another amazing start, like always. But once I got past Ben, it was all right, but it's always a bit difficult overtaking the PR man for TVR. So it was a good race after that. We just showed our pace and just pulled away.
Lee assured me he was going to go off of the line, but never mind. Ben made a reasonable start. I was alongside him though into the first corner. I can't remember what happened on lap 2, but Lee managed to get past us both. And it was a hard battle after that, trying to get past Ben. He drives a wide car anyway.
I bunged Lee a tenner before the race started and said, come on, just give us a couple of laps in front for the boys. But no, it was fantastic. Lee got a fairly bad start. I guess he was on the dirty side of the track. And, well, I found myself, much to my enormous surprise, actually in front going to the first corner and spent the whole of the first lap saying, don't throw it off, don't throw it off. And somehow managed not to.
We're ready for the feature race of round 4 of the Carlube TVR Tuscan Challenge. Lee Caroline, David Mason and Ben Samuelson were the top 3 in the sprint race. They're the top 3 on the grid for this 14-lapper that's about to get underway as the lights go from red to green now. Tim Hood makes a good start from the back of the grid after a gearbox problem in the earlier race, and there's a clash there already between Hay and Samuelson. The two teammates barge into each other, leaving the line. Phil Keane tries to split them, and as the cars turn their way through Duffer's Dip for the first time, is David Mason leading. Jan Persson's off on the grass there in the background, look, sliding his way down the hill. Oh dear, so I'm afraid we've had contact at the start. Jan Persson not looking as though he's going to recover there. The car very, very slow to try and get back onto the tarmac. So the cars are out of the chicane for the first time, and Richard Hay now is down in 5th place. We're on board with him as he turns his way through Clark, and the cars accelerate towards the hairpin on lap 1. It's Mason leading, Caroline, another duff start by Lee Caroline. Ben Samuelson's 3rd. In 4th place, Darren Dowling. Richard Hay 5th after that clash with Ben at the start of the race. Then 6th is Phil Keane. 7th already is Tim Hood. Great first lap. 8th is Rod Barrett. 9th there is the circuit owner Derek Butcher in only his 2nd ever Tuscan race. And David Mason comes across the line. Lee Caroline, though, says he likes Knock Hill and he's going well here at the moment. In 3rd, tucked up with him is Ben Samuelson. And then Dowling and Hay carrying on their race 1 battle. Jan Persson heading for the pit lane. Look, the Swedish driver, who's based in London these days, comes into the pit road. And here's a replay on board with Jan of what happened at the start. Turning into Duffer's Dip. Bang! Big whack in the side of the car. And there's a horrible tinkling noise that suggests that something's broken. And Jan Persson tries to get himself back onto the tarmac. Now this is Wayne Phelan. And you can see his view of what went on ahead. It may well have been either Peter Wheeler or Derek Butcher that did the argy-bargy with Persson. The 2 cars hitting pretty solidly, but David Mason, the race leader, goes way out wide and Clark all over the grass, and Lee Caroline says thank you very much. He inherits the lead, and now Ben Samuelson comes through as well to take 2nd place. Great stuff. Samuelson 2nd, down to 3rd. David Mason, who was leading a couple of corners ago. In 4th place is still Darren Dowling, fending off Richard Hay, whose car must have a problem because we know Hay can go much quicker than this. Phil Keane 6th, Tim Hood 7th as they come over the line. The leader, though, Lee Caroline, going now down towards Duffer's Dip. Knock Hill, as you've heard the driver saying already, a very tight circuit. It's not one that they can really overtake too readily at. Well, Lee Caroline has done a very good job. He's the lap record holder here. He leads for the 2nd time today. Ben Samuelson, 3rd in race 1. He's lying 2nd at the moment, but David Mason wants the place back as they come out of the chicane. Heading into Clark. Ben Samuelson, the man that's absorbed all the pressure all day, pretty much, doing it again. He's got David Mason tucked up behind him. And then Darren Dowling and Richard Hay, both of whom normally are able to run at the front, not yet close enough to the 2 ahead. It's a 2-way fight, not a 4-way fight for 2nd place. And then 3 of them fighting for 4th now. Dowling, Hay and Keane running together. Behind Phil Keane is Tim Hood, having one of his better races here as the cars accelerate up out of the hairpin. Going over the line, Caroline goes through, Samuelson goes through, Mason goes through. Can Richard Hay go through on the inside and take 4th place? Yes, he can. Up on the inside, plan the manoeuvre coming over the line. Richard Hay moves ahead now of Darren Dowling. Richard turning his way through the right-hander of McIntyre's. Right again as the road drops away and then climbs uphill through Butchers on towards the Glenvarrigal chicane. Look at the way that Phil Keane's attacking Darren Dowling now. Very vigorous all over the curb there. Phil Keane, former single-seater racer, came from Formula Renault into Tuscans last year. Richard Hay making a run now up towards the hairpin. You can see behind him, Keane looking for a way past Dowling. Darren defending well. Philip Keane gets caught behind a very slow Richard Hay. Masterful avoidance. That was a big moment for Philip Keane. But suddenly Richard Hay's car slows. Dowling, Keane and Hood all go past him. Philip Keane, masterful avoidance of Richard Hay, gains the place off Dowling, whose car slows as well, coming up over the top of the brow there. So it is Caroline, Samuelson, Mason and Phil Keane goes 4th, Tim Hood goes 5th, Richard Hay goes 6th, and Darren Dowling is down to 7th. And here is Richard Hay's view. Suddenly the car loses power. Down to the hairpin. Philip Keane avoids him, goes past him, Darren Dowling goes past him, and Richard Hay tries to find a low gear and find a bit of grunt coming out of the corner. Just about picks up pace once again, but clearly there is something amiss with Richard Hay. He should be bidding for a race win. At the moment he's trying to get himself back into a decent place within the top 6. Into the hairpin, Samuelson versus Mason, the 2 of them running together. Side by side out of the hairpin this time. David Mason using all of the curb, levelling with Ben on the outside line behind them. Keane is still 4th, Caroline leads ahead of them and down towards Duffer's Dip. Ben Samuelson braving it out on the inside with Mason on the outside. Ben Samuelson just about hangs on to the pace, but Mason quicker down the hill. He's got the place, but he's got the outside line as well for the next corner at McIntyre's. They lean on each other. David Mason is not to be denied though. He goes round the outside of Ben Samuelson, climbing uphill now. Ben touching the curb, going into the chicane. David Mason is ahead of him at last though. Up into 2nd goes Mason, down to 3rd goes Ben Samuelson. So at the moment we have the same top 3 as we had in the sprint race. Remember though that in this one, Mason led and effectively threw away the lead by going over the grass. Now you can see how people have been held up by Ben Samuelson here. Ben's done a great job of defending. Now he's attacking again, he goes up the inside, he locks up, he goes wide. Takes 2nd place, loses 2nd place. He's 3rd, coming out of the corner, somebody off there. That's Jan Persson again. We've seen him in trouble once, we've seen him in the pit lane. Well now he's back on the track and he's in the gravel. Over the line, David Mason is 2nd. In 3rd place is Samuelson, but now 4th is Tim Hood, going tremendously well. Phil Keane 5th and Richard Hay only 6th at the moment. Now, is Ben Samuelson going to be able to hang on to a place on the podium? That's Richard Hay struggling a little bit there, coming out of McIntyre's using all of the curb. Clearly something is amiss with that car, and it's now hampering Richard Hay. He's losing touch with the top 5. You can see there, Tim Hood and Phil Keane, they've switched places, of course, and Tim Hood up from very last on the grid, doing a tremendous job in the jet black motorsport car now, heading up towards the hairpin. Stands on the brakes, down through the gearbox, squeal of tyres ahead of him. Ben Samuelson once again, and there's somebody off. Whoops, Derek Butcher, the circuit owner, getting it wrong. Rod Barrett goes ahead of him. Well, certainly Derek knows about the circuit. He's still learning about the car. Only his second race in the Tuscan, and a big slide there which cost him a place. Phil Keane there going through. Meantime, the fight's on now, of course, for third place. You can see it because here Ben Samuelson's under pressure of a rather sideways Tim Hood, making their way from Clark up towards the hairpin. Phil Keane looking for a way past Tim Hood. Hood looking for a way past Samuelson. He's going to have a go on the inside, although Tim's a bit ragged, under braking. Scrabbles by on the inside. Ben runs up alongside him on the exit of the corner. Side by side, Ben with better momentum from a quicker line, so Samuelson retakes his third place. Tim Hood slips to fourth, but he's under pressure as well now. Phil Keane right up behind him as they come now down towards the right-hander of Duffer's Dip. Turn into the corner, thump the curb. Hood under real pressure. You can see him now having to work very hard to fend off Philip Keane. Ben Samuelson, TVR's PR man, he's been in the job for, what, 10 years or so now. Comes out of the corner at the chicane, accelerates along the straight towards Clark Curve with Tim Hood tucked right up behind him. Phil Keane there as well. And whoever taught Ben Samuelson defensive driving deserves a medal because it is doing very good stuff. Ben Samuelson is still third, although for how much longer? Tim Hood challenging on the outside as they come into the hairpin. They both brake ludicrously late. Tim Hood's car gets all crossed up, so Ben Samuelson goes back at him on the inside, but Hood switches lines. Tim Hood's alongside. They touch, though, coming up over the line. Hood is delayed slightly by that, and Philip Keane's got a chance to get past Tim Hood, which he does take as they come across the line. Fourth goes Keane. He's going to challenge for third on the inside as well. It's all going to end in tears if they're not careful, but Ben Samuelson hangs on to third place. Phil Keane's fourth as they go through Duffer's Dip. Fifth is Hood. Sixth there is Richard Hay. They're all bunching up once again. Can Phil Keane get onto the podium? Ben Samuelson sideways, going out of McIntyre's, up through Butcher's. They almost touch again. Ben goes off the circuit there. He's airborne, across the gravel, back onto the tarmac. Hood goes past him. Richard Hay seems to slow. Ben Samuelson, his teammate, gets back on ahead of him. Richard Hay riding shotgun. Ben Samuelson is down to fifth then. So this is for the last place on the podium now. You're looking at the battle for Phil Keane versus Tim Hood as they come up towards the hairpin. From a dozen cars, we've had two of the best races for a while in the Tuscan Challenge. And it's not over yet. The battle for third, Phil Keane versus Tim Hood as they make the run out of the hairpin and come up across the line. Ben Samuelson looking safe in fifth place. Richard Hay is sixth as they come over the line, but Tim Hood wants third as he comes into Duffer's Dip. Starting the last lap of the race now, challenging on the inside, but Phil Keane defends pretty well there. Down they come now, into McIntyre's, turn right, drop downhill, turn right through Butcher's, then climb up through the Glenvarrigal chicane. Use as much of the curb as you can to make the corner straighter and therefore quicker. Then there's the short straight to Clark. From Clark you turn left, you have a straight to the hairpin, through which now Lee Caroline, the race leader, and soon to become race winner, turns. He accelerates up across the line. Knock Hill's his favourite circuit. You can see why. 2 out of 2 in the Carloom TVR Tuscan Challenge for Lee Caroline. Victorious then here at Knock Hill. For second is David Mason. Phil Keane third. Tim Hood fourth. Ben Samuelson fifth. Richard Hay sixth. And Darren Dowling, somebody else has had a pretty subdued day, will finish in 7th place. But Lee Caroline is the man at the moment. 2 race wins here. David Mason chasing him 6 seconds adrift though across the line, and Phil Keane comes up well to take third in these last few laps. Tim Hood is fourth ahead of Samuelson, and then Richard Hay.
The car's right, I felt good, lovely circuit, so combination of things just made us have the pace this weekend, but I'm sure that they won't let me get away with it for long, so next round I'm sure I have to, I think it's Silverstone and I've never been there.
It was a good scrap you had with Ben Samuelson again, and you managed to get him around the outside into Duffer's Dip, I think it was. Was that a good move?
If we hadn't have had good clean racing in the first race, I wouldn't have tried it. But we knew where we stood with each other, and it was clean racing in the first race, so that's where we started off again.
I got up into third at the first corner, and I think Richard Hay turned into me, and I think they bent the steering rack or something. But I think the car was actually could have gone a lot quicker, but we struggled a little bit towards the end. I had to let Tim past and sort of save the tyres a bit.
This, though, is how the championship looks 4 rounds in. David Mason's the leader, but only by 2 points from Lee Caroline, with Ben Samuelson third. Phil Keen's fourth ahead of Peter Wheeler. Aaron Dowling is sixth.